our last council meeting of the triennium. I'm going to ask Councillor Anderson to begin us with a karakia, please.
Whakawhalaia te kimatolosi. So I'll start with Loto. I'm going to do whakatakatahau. Whakatakatahau ki te uru, whakatakatahau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hiaki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei Māori ora.
Thanks, Matty. Just in terms of the order of business, there's a very thin couple of confidential items. It's my intention at one of the breaks in the afternoon, just to make it easier for members of the public, just to deal with those confidential items on the tail end of one of those breaks, so that when we have the valedictory speeches from our retiring councillors, we can continuously go through those onto the afternoon tea that is for them. Can I also just acknowledge, with it being the last council term of the year, our presence from the media, both Nelson Mail, Nelson Weekly and Radio New Zealand form a very important function. I was quite amused that the Weekly had an internal mural contest as part of taking the mickey out of us guys that are trying to get re-elected, and that Max was successfully elected as the mayor of the Nelson Weekly on ticket of having a free dishwashing at their headquarters. And I was thinking whether that would work for us. But I acknowledge Max, but also acknowledge Warren, the members of the Nelson Mail and the Radio New Zealand. We don't always agree with what you say, but we absolutely acknowledge the importance of having independent media that are forming a crucial part of our local democracy. Are there any interests that any member needs to declare specifically to the business of today's council meeting? There is not. Then we come to public forum, and I welcome Gia Thompson. And I understand you've got Max and Hamish Clark with you as well, who are most welcome to join you at the table, Gia, if you wish. We've got 5 minutes set aside for public forum. I acknowledge that your application came in and we had a little bit of a tussle with respect to our last council meeting, but a very warm welcome to this meeting, Gia.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nick and councillors. Look, I'm extremely concerned at this waste of this $43 million of the ratepayer money for this Bridge for Better, as it will be bad for Bridge, because it's just a complete nonsense. It's unbelievable to spend all this, and no doubt more when you take council staff into time, to remove 40 car parks and restrict the entrances to Buxton and Montgomery car parks to just one way. Just doesn't make any sense at all. Why make it more difficult to shop in Bridge Street? Why make it more difficult for people to enter and leave the two major car parks? For example, you know, Elmer Lane, spending a heap of money on that when it was working perfectly well as a two-way entry and exit. And when there's only one other car exit out of Buxton car park being onto Collingwood Street, which is, you know, a fairly busy street. There are plenty of pedestrian and cycleways able to get into the car park there. There's one by the Kiwi Bank, one by Matthews Optometrist, one by Speedy Print or 124 Bridge, and a pedestrian one through Farmers. So it wasn't for a shortage of pedestrian. There wasn't need to make another one. Just totally stupid. And why was the decision of this just left to the likes of a small bunch of councillors who I saw the thing online? It was Matty Anderson, Rowan and Neil Stevens and James Hodgson made the decision to make these things one way. Why was that not put to the full council and a bit of sanity come into the matter? And the lack of real consultation on this project and the $7 million cost of shifting the bus depots out of the main part of town where people could use it better to Miller's Acre, with the loss of a further 61 car parks earning money is just unbelievable. And for convenience to the people, it is just so hard to accept. There was no annual plan hearing this year, so people weren't able to have expressed their views on some of these sort of things, which should have been. And the council, I notice now, censoring the views on Facebook by restricting comments and that sort of thing. It is just a bit like a dictatorship. The council is supposed to be here to serve the community, which by doing that sort of thing, they're not listening to people. And we've found from talking to these things, it seems as if the business community's views get totally ignored when a lot of these things are put up. For councillors that are going to be re-elected, please do not squander the money that has been, wasted in the last few years. I could not believe that one said, just leave making the decision on the museum. No one said just the museum storage facility after John Fitchett's very sensible proposal of the Big Save building, which would have been in Nelson, closer to the museum, saved a heap of money, and was already built. It just needed the air conning and that sort of thing to make it suitable. But nobody said, what are we doing? Why did we delay it a week? By adding the cost of bridge to better and the bus depot to the current debt, it takes it up to around 290 million. 6 years ago, that's not long ago, it was 86 million. What's that say? It's some big increase in the last 2 terms of council. High debt results in high rates, which means a lot of people have got less money to spend to support the businesses in town. And another big item is what's the cost of the e-buses with their overweight that's causing us a lot of, and I saw that it was $50 a passenger subsidy. So I don't know, I could go on, but I'll let Max have his, we say, and then if there's more time, I'll ever go on something else.
Hi, I'm Max Clark. We own the Lincraft. We own the Lincraft building, and at this stage, we are finding that the car parks are even going to be reduced even more outside around there. We suffer from that. As you know, 90% of the Nelson people drive to the front of the destination. And with those all going, it's going to be a major to have a decent. Secondly, the trees that are in that area, I hope that somebody in the council is taking note of them, because we have to clean our gutters now every 6 weeks to get the trees that are coming from that tree outside Noel Leemings. It's a real big hazard.
Can I just a quick clarification, Max? What was the location of where your building is, Max? Just so I can understand.
83.
83 of
the old warehouse stationery building.
Oh yeah, I know you are. We only in our standing orders have questions for clarification. Councillor Sanson has indicated that she did wish to have a question, but I do wish to keep it relatively narrow to clarification issues.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Kia ora, Gia and Max. Nice to have you both here. Thanks for coming. It's always interesting to get different views of the public forum. Gia, I just wanted to check with the Bridge to Better project. Are you aware that the primary purpose of that project is actually to do a major infrastructure upgrade underneath the road to enable about 1,000 people to live in the city centre? The thinking of council was that if we have 1,000 people living in the city centre, it'll make it more vibrant, more people, better for local businesses. I just wanted to check that.
Yes, but that's
that understanding.
That's an airy-fairy idealistic view, because building and creating these residences in town is not cheap. It's not going to happen. As I understand it, that whole thing was driven by these 2 buildings of 8 floors of social housing down the end of the street wanting more facilities to go to them. I don't think it was driven by the need for other than that. And that part is getting subsidised by the government. And the drains, if they do need doing, which I doubt, but if they do need doing, well, that's fair enough. But you can leave the street. You just do the drains down the street, seal it over again. You don't go all this fancy stuff of whipping off the footpaths, putting a drain down the middle, putting in gardens, soak gardens and things, and removing car parks, which are the lifeblood of provincial towns. This has happened in places like Dunedin and Invercargill. I was in Invercargill yesterday, and down Esk Street, where they've done all this sort of thing, there's 4 vacant shops now. You know, it makes it hard for people to park and things. And then they next door in the big city building there, they've got a whole big car park. But of course, a lot of provincial people don't necessarily want to go in there and then have to walk down to where they're going to go to the shops. They like to park handily.
We've ran out of time for public forum, Gear. Can I thank you for your presentation? I'm sure the debates on the issues that you raised will continue. And obviously the results of the local election will have some makeup on all of the representation around the council table. And can I also thank you as well, Max, for taking the time to come and see us today. Thank you. We come to item 5.1 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the meetings of 4th and 25th September. I'm going to move from the chair that those minutes be adopted. Councillor Sanson has indicated she is happy to second. Is there any questions on those minutes? That being the case, I shall put those. All those in favour that they be adopted, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. They are adopted. We come to item 6.1, which is the annual report of the Nelson Regional Sewerage Business Unit. Would a member of the Regional Business Unit Committee be prepared to move the adoption of their annual report? Thank you, Councillor Skinner.
Happy to. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Paki. Is there any discussion on that annual report? I'm going to put its adoption. Those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. We then come to that we receive the draft business plan for 26-27. Again, Tim, would you be, Councillor Skinner, you'd be happy to second first? And Kahu Paki, you happy to second as a member of the business unit, the draft business plan? That being the case, is there any discussion? Thanks, Councillor Brand.
Through the Mayor, I just want a clarification, please, on the climate adaptation process where it talks about the summary note significance progress on climate adaptation. Could we briefly outline what projects this refers to for transparency? And then my second clarification question is, I'll wait for the answers of that and then see if it's relevant.
I'm happy to take either a response from Alec or members of the business unit. I would stress that this is the draft business plan and that council will have the opportunity to both review and provide feedback separate to today's meeting before it is finalised for 26-27. But Alec, I'm happy to take some comment from you with respect to Councillor Brad's question about the climate adaptation work.
Through the chair, I wouldn't be able to provide specific comment other than to reiterate what you've indicated, that this is a draft. This will be workshopped with the new council in some form, and then we will be providing feedback to the NRSBU as required. But certainly off the hoof, I wouldn't be able to answer Councillor Brand's questions. Sorry.
Okay, well then I just want to indicate for reference there, my two questions because of that as a draft is that the allocation for the smart city is 1.2 million and the upgrades are promising. Could we please clarify then what this encompasses, such as specific technologies, infrastructure or service improvements, and whether any components involve data collection, public surveillance or third-party platforms? And then my second thing that I'd like to note and have clarified is the 18% reduction in the community engagement budget stood out. Could we please confirm the reasoning behind that and whether it reflects efficiency, shifting priorities or reducing scope, and how it might affect our ability to reduce reach and include diverse community voices, especially when these areas of engagement historically has been lower? Thank you.
Does either a member of the business committee or Alec wish to respond? I tell you the other part we could do is the questions are relatively detailed. I'd be quite comfortable with a written response from Nathan and the head of the business unit to the points that Councillor Brand has quite appropriately raised. because then they can help inform the ongoing discussion. But Alec, if you would like to add anything.
No, through the chair, I think that's a good process. We will log those questions and we will make sure that we have answers for the new council.
Councillor Skinner?
I'm happy to give a little bit of feedback from my recall of the meeting, but once again, it's pretty detailed in the business plan. And if I got that right, is Councillor Brands was asking in what regards? In regards to climate, was that in regards to?
Both climate and community consultation budgets.
Okay, yeah, so that was in regards to implementing the NRSBU's vision in regards to like reusing some of that wastewater, etc. And in regards to more use of it on land, etc. So it's just using ways of trying to make it more efficiently and for the growth of the region, but also to fit in with our strategic plans. But that will be coming out in that draft for us to. I'm happy to forward that business plan. It's quite an in-depth one. I'm happy to forward that on to councillors. But it's looking really a vision that we've been working on in the last 2 terms at least, and it's about reusing the wastewater for things like water and golf course, etc. There's been a great push in that.
My view is that because we're just receiving the report, the draft, and there's going to be further opportunity, I think the process that we've outlined, whereby the answers can be obtained to those questions, can I ask that they be circulated to all councillors and that help inform the process going forward, Alec, when we come to adopt that business plan for 26-27?
Absolutely, through the mayor, yes.
Lovely, thank you. On that basis, the motion has been moved and seconded. I'm going to put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no, carried. We've got 2 hearing panels decisions. The first is for Network Tasman, and that is for a easement in respect of Te Hunanui Beach in the Bisley Walk area. Is someone prepared to move the adoption of the hearing panel's recommendations for that consent for that easement? I'm happy to do so from the chair. Councillor Rollo is happy to second that. I'm just thinking for 2 seconds. I am a trustee of Network Tasman, and I think I'd prefer to have somebody other than myself move it. Councillor Courtney, are you happy to move? So moved by Councillor Courtney and seconded by Councillor Rollo. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And contrary, say no. That is carried. We come to the easement for Chorus in Wesley Terrace. Again, it's gone to a hearings panel. It is for an easement for a fibre optic cable. And it's in respect of over a reserve of which the Minister of Conservation has delegated our powers. Is someone prepared to move the adoption of the recommendation for the easement being granted to Chorus? I'm happy to move this one. I've no conflict. Pete, would you be happy to second? All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. That is adopted. We come to the next item on the agenda, which is my Mayor's report. In my Mayor's report this month, I have made some reflections over the last term, over the key things that this council has achieved over it. And I want to re-emphasise by comments in the report that every one of the elected councillors of this organisation can take pride in what has been achieved over the last 3 years. If you ask me where I have been pleasantly surprised, and I don't normally in my reports single out a single staff member, but if you ask me when I was elected mayor and the scale of the infrastructure damage and the challenges from the August 22 storm, I did not honestly think we would be in a good position as we are today in resolving those issues. And Alec, the city is forever indebted to you for the scale of energy and professionalism that you have given to the post-August 22 storm. And I mean that absolutely genuinely. I know you would want to note the team that has backed you up, but there is more credit for staff than elected members in the way in which that whole, both the emergency effort, the recovery, and the way in which we have worked through collectively as a team. I am pleasantly surprised, given the scale of the financial pressures that came with that event, that this council was able to resolve both the financial challenges as well as the infrastructure and those difficult issues of housing pretty much on a consensual basis. And that is a huge credit. I've also made some notes about the relationships. It is my view that when each of us were elected in 2022, our relationships were strained in so many ways. And it is to the credit of every single member around this table that I think those relationships are in far better shape. I would note we've all had our off days, myself included, but collectively, I think the council has functioned very well over the last term. I've noted there 12 particular highlights for me of things of which we have successfully achieved. I have noted that our new chief executive has embarked over the last 6 months on the very embarked in respect of the shaping our future and substantive restructuring of council. The part and the reason I've highlighted that in my report is that it is going to be a big change, and that I think the chief executive came new into local government and the timing is right. I would have been a lot more nervous if you embarked on this plan in your first few months in the role. But it is going to be quite challenging over the next 3 to 6 months as the new leadership team that the chief executive is bringing in, as well as the new councils. And I've just noted in my report it's going to require a fair amount of goodwill to make the transition. With any of these change, there's some pain that goes along the way, albeit I'm absolutely satisfied that the investment and the change is in the best interests of our organisation long term. The last area I comment, and I say it quite openly, is that the last 4 months for both Nelson and the region has been as dark and as challenging as I can remember in 35 years of being an elected representative for this community. I hope the bad news has ended with last Friday's announcement by Sealord of moving to a seasonal rather than a permanent plan. But, and it's only my own reflection, and the voters will get to decide whether I stay here beyond Saturday. But in exactly the same way that the big challenge for this council was overcoming the storm from August 22, it is my view over the next 3 years that the biggest challenge for council is going to be in respect of economic recovery for the city and for the region. Today I am jointly writing with Mayor King to the Minister of Employment around some of the short-term issues. What I'm seeking support from government there is that we've got up to 500 people being displaced from their current employment, not all at once, but seeking support to try and get the maximum level of job placements, working with the Economic Development Agency and with the Chamber of Commerce, so that where people are displaced, we can support getting them into other jobs as quickly as possible. In the short term, I believe that tourism is one of the areas where we need to take every opportunity we can to get more visitors to our region. I've appreciated the support from government in providing finance for a domestic tourism campaign. I think it's a real sign of leadership from the Minister of Tourism that she herself is choosing to have her summer break holiday in our region. And one of the reasons I think that in the short term offers prospects for some recovery is because Nelson is significantly behind other regions in the post-COVID tourism. If I look at the numbers nationwide, Queenstown's now ahead of pre-COVID tourism numbers. Nelson is behind, and I think we do need to have a concerted effort working with the visitor industry to maximise those opportunities. I've also outlined in my report that I am genuinely far more confident about 2026. The huge investment from council in Bridge to Better, the hundreds of millions that the government will be well underway with the hospital redevelopment, the fast track approval of the Mahi Tahi development, as well as the work Alec team is doing on the flood protection work on the Maitai, is a massive infrastructure investment going into our city, and there will be a flow through into the construction industry and through the broader economy. The bigger question, so that's sort of the short and the medium term, In my view, the bigger long-term challenge is particularly with industries like food and beverage. And next week, myself and Mayor King are meeting with members of that sector to better understand the pressures that's on them, because it is my view that the long-term economic interests of our region still rests with those core primary industries that have taken such a serious whack over the last 4 months. So that's my comments for the report. Happy to take questions or comment from colleagues before my Mayor's report is put to the vote. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to acknowledge you. Don't always agree on everything, and some of the stuff my mates say about you isn't very nice, but I give you a pass. You've done an all right job, and that's pretty gushy, so thanks.
That's appreciated, Councillor Anderson, and can I note your own contribution as being part of the glue that has held the team here together, and you've been generous in your endeavours to help build a more collegial council. Councillor Rollo.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, and thank you for echo the comments of Maddie Anderson there, for the work that you've done in bringing us all together. And I think some of the highlights that we can celebrate as a council is the fact that we've all shown up here on the final day of work as well. So thank you for that. My question is around a number of these job announcements that are happening, and I notice a number of them aren't directly impacting our CBD. A lot of them are out, Hot Federation, which is Mochi Wake, but also in our industrial areas. And I just wonder what's your sense of what you're hearing from the inner city businesses at the moment as we start embarking on some major work? Are you hearing good stuff or a bit of a worry out there?
Firstly, I think we have to acknowledge that our hospitality and retail sector has probably had the toughest winter in 20 years. Just can't walk away from that. I think the major drivers of that have been the national recession that has entered post-COVID. And so I think we need to be open that those businesses are finding it tough. I also think we need to acknowledge that the Bridge to Better project is going to be quite disruptive for those businesses in that area. And there is no easy answer to how we manage our way through that. Look, I know that Gear Thompson, who's a significant owner, and others have some scepticism around some of that intercity investment. I'm not in a position to be able to disclose publicly, but I am very encouraged by a number of property investors who are committed to substantive investments in our city. And in my view, the Bridge to Better and other investments that we are making in the city are about securing that long-term future. The last bit I'd add is that, and another positive picture, is we do want to make Nelson a great place to study. I talked about the tourism sector. I'm actually hugely encouraged by the work that NMIT is doing in growing its international students. I think there is more that we can do to make Nelson a hip and popular place for young people to study in. I'm optimistic that NMIT will again lift its number of international students next year. That does not mean that we should not listen to Gear Thompson and others and their concerns about the CBD. The last thing I'd say with respect to the central city, some people argue it's tourism or it's students or it's retail or it's people living in the city. My view is it is all of the above. And the last bit I would note is later in today's council agenda, the changes that we're making flowing on from Plan Change 29 to make it easier for people to make substantial investments in the city. I would have been approached by at least 4 private property owners who, off the back of those changes, are intending to make substantive investments in our city. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and I join others in saying thank you for your report. Fulsome report, particularly highlighting what we've achieved during the past term. Mayor Nick, I'm getting feedback too about Bridge to Better. And the theme, it's constructive criticism. They're saying, Mel, we hear Bridge to Better. We're hearing it all. We don't even know what it means. We don't know what it means. Now, you're going to say how many people have said that to me? 2. but I respect their, I do, I respect their judgment. And they are suggesting that we put up what I call interpretive panels, but panels explaining the project, photographs of it in the central city so that they can get to understand it. And they feel very strongly about it. So there's a thought to carry on to our officers. Thank you.
Thanks for the suggestion. I think some of the comms that our council staff has done around explaining the project has been very good. I particularly compliment the work of Paul in the community engagement, but we can always do more. The other part that I do have a view, and that is if you're going to rip a street up, you are best to do the sewer, the water, the communications, the electricity, and do it all in one bang, because it is highly disruptive for those businesses. And I think we have made, despite criticism, the right call in the do it once, do it properly camp. And they've got a job to explain all of that. Councillor Rainey.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks for your report. I'd like to echo Councillor Anderson's thoughts in regards to the level of collegiality around this table this term. I think has been pretty good, really good. You know, I don't often say that I enjoy going to council, but I think I've enjoyed this term more than any that I can remember. We have had our moments, and there have been moments of tension, but generally, as a group of people, I'm really happy to say that I think, you know, I'm talking about the elected councillors and the staff, we've all gone on pretty well. So it does make a tremendous difference to what can be quite a tricky job. Nick, I also share your optimism about the level of development that I think we're on the brink of in the city, and I think it's going to be an extremely exciting time for Nelson. In regards to the hits that we've had over the last few months, I was wanting to know whether you had any updates that you could give us in regards to the Eves Valley Mill, in that one of the impacts that's really going to impact our city is the increase in trucking, which is going to happen to get rid of all of the logs if they go out as logs, which inevitably it looks like they're going to. Have there been any further developments that you can share with us in terms of what the possibilities might be for Eves Valley, or is it all over?
Good questions. The first is you're right to highlight the double whammy of Eves Valley closing, as well as the 2 million tonne of wood that has come down in the July weather event, which is estimated to add about 60 trucks a day into the city. And there is going to be a real challenge, Alec, for you and the infrastructure team as to how we program some of our roadworks, including the improved resilience on State Highway 6 with that flow of additional wood to port. I think it is likely, somewhat ironically, that the port company will have a better financial year for that increase in volume of wood coming over, which will probably flow through in terms of dividends that the council receives. But that's short-term gain for long-term down. In respect of Eves Valley, I would have had a correspondence from 6 different companies with proposals for what happens with that sawmill. My worst fear is what occurred when the Golden Bay Cement Works was closed 30 years ago, where its owners had a huge interest effectively in monopolising and making sure no one else got it because they wished to, ironically and similarly, concentrate all of the cement manufacture at the one site in Whangarei. I am worried that Carter Holt Harvey has a similar incentive not to allow anybody to take over that Eves Valley sawmill from the point of view that that is a potential competitor from their single manufacturing site now in Kaurau. It's a very interesting philosophical question for government as to when someone owns private property and doesn't want it used for manufacturing for potentially anti-competitive reasons, as to whether there's any justification for intervention. Now, that's still to play out. Carter Holt Harvey are indicating that production from Eves Valley will end in November. Whether they will be open to selling it to other companies, potentially with conditions. If I had my greatest hope, it is this. The wood that is manufactured out of Nelson has a high level of density, unlike from the Central North Island and most parts of New Zealand, that enables it to be able to meet the density requirements of framing timber in Australia. And Australia is a buoyant market. the best hope for us, in my view, would be for the Eves Valley Mill to be used for the export of structural timber into the Australian market. Whether it would be possible for a private sector player to do a deal with Carter Holt Harvey on the basis that they didn't use the wood for domestic market and only for export is a possibility. What I can assure you is that myself and Mayor King, and I'm having a further meeting with ministers next week, is that we are doing everything possible to try and facilitate that, albeit we have got the barrier that they own the plant, and under our current law, they are perfectly entitled to effectively mothball it and not have it further used for timber processing. Are there any other questions of my mayor's report? That being the case, I shall put
No vote required. It's not a.
Oh, it's not even a reply. Gee, I would have made it far more controversial if that was the case, Mr. Chief Executive. We come to item 7.2, which is members' reimbursement and expenses policy, and invite our officers, Devra, to present the report. For background, this is a statutory requirement that follows the decision of the Remuneration Authority, which annually sets a determination. There are a number of tweaks that are being proposed to the policy, and the document that is being distributed does involve some further minor changes, not necessarily minor, but relative to the size of the document. And I particularly want to provide elected members with the opportunity to be able to understand the further tweaks that are proposed that are slightly different to those that was in the papers that have been circulated. Welcome, Nikki and Devra, in presenting this report.
If I may, through the chair, I'll just kick off by saying that there's a change to clause 6, which you'll note as a request of some members. I don't want to debate that openly because there's some issues around security, and I don't want to. If people would like to debate that and the reasoning for that change, I'm more than happy to propose that we go into confidential session. But and I can cover it off later in confidential anyway. But if you want to debate that now, we would need to go into confidential.
So can you clarify what's the change? I missed what point it was.
The issue is the provision of devices and the policy with respect to whether elected members must use the council provided device.
Yeah. And
Now, some of the reasons for the council.
I heard all of it except for the point. Thanks. Yeah.
So here's the point. If members would like to have a debate about those provisions about devices, it relates to matters of cybersecurity. It is not good for cybersecurity for us to be scrutinising stuff.
I'll ask you to stop there, Mr. Mayor. I really don't want you to. Those are the.
So if there is a discussion about those, then we need to do that in confidential business because we do not wish to advertise what the rationale for improving security around our devices is. So can I just check, is there anybody that is wanting to get into a discussion around the revised provisions of council provide devices for elected members, noting that the chief executive has made changes in response to feedback from councillors?
It's the status quo that we've had this time. Just for clarification, we've gone back. So it's basically what we've been doing this time. There was a proposal to change that. It's my strong desire that elected members are issued with a council laptop. But I've had some feedback from elected members, and I'm prepared to retain the status quo for the time being, noting that it's my strong desire for elected members to have that. I don't want to say anything further from that. If people want to have questions about that, then we should go into confidential.
Councillor Skinner?
Yes, that's some clarified. I'm not going to debate now, but it did, and I'll put my feedback. I saw your feedback. Thank you on that, to Deborah. So I see what's in here, as you're saying, we're not making a change, but status quo, and that will be something you'd like to discuss further next term with those who are elected. Is that right?
I'd like to keep it under review, but I'm prepared for the time being, noting the number of comments from elected members, that we keep the status quo for the time being.
Thank you. And I think it was, if that's what you've got back, it was something very important that would and should, in my view, elected councillors, either present or the future, should have an input on that. There's a lot of knowledge base there on this. Is something that was done back in 2013, 2010. It was done. Actually, other councillors probably had a point on that, but thank you. You've put my mind at ease.
Thank you. Why don't we ask our officers to present report, and if further questions develop in that area, I'll make the judgment call as to whether we need to go into confidential business. Councillor Stella? Is that okay? So I'll ask Nikki and Devora to present the report, and I'm particularly keen for you to highlight where the revised document is different from that previously, just so that members are absolutely aware of those changes.
Thank you, Minik. Through the chair, kia ora koutou. I will largely take this as read. The table of changes that you've received alongside the tweaked policy outlines what's shifted between what you had read within the agenda and the matters that the Chief Executive has just spoken to. So Section 6 is been taken back to what you had already adopted in September 2024. There's also a minor change for clarification at 10.36 to specify that resolution is required for international travel only when it relates to council business. So if someone that happened to be an elected member was travelling to see a family member, you wouldn't need to seek council approval for that. So just a small point of clarification there. Going back to the policy that you received in the report, and which the matters which were changed at that point and have not shifted in the latest update. Just pointing out a couple of things there that have come through from the Remuneration Authority, which are now reflected in the policy. The Remuneration Authority has increased the maximum allowable claim amount for the childcare allowance, so that has been reflected in the policy. And the Remuneration Authority has also provided for a new allowance for home security systems. We have included that in the policy with some high-level initial process thinking as to how that might be approached if it was considered necessary by any elected members. Other changes in the policy are really just around, again, clarification, just seeking to improve with your understanding on process and hopefully simplifying things a little bit as well. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Stella, then Rainey.
Thanks, Minik. Just focusing on section 6, I note in the draft we were sent in the agenda, it is distinguished in different paragraphs within there between laptops and then what was called mobile telephone devices. But now in the latest revision hard copy in front of us, just the word device is used, except sometimes specifically it mentions laptop. So I guess like in 6.5, for example, that's referring to laptops and phones. Is that the case?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and just where it says a policy will be pushed to the device, what does policy mean? Is it some kind of software, an app, or what is the meaning of that to force pin prediction, for example? That's not a policy, is it? That's some kind of IT arrangement.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, that's not a policy of this form, but an IT process, yes.
And that's not something we've had this term, that's something new. And that same thing that we pushed, will be what the organisation uses to wipe the device if lost or disconnect things and so on? Will it all be under that piece of software or app or add-on or something?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, that's correct. This creates consistency with the organisational approach that's applied to staff as well.
Okay, and just finally, I wonder, the last bullet point in 6.5, it would put me more at ease if that was just had a bit more detail. Because to say the reserves the right to disconnect devices, then the question, of course, disconnect from what? I'm guessing it's council provided services. So, I mean, it would be good if that could be added, if that was okay. Or disable services. And again, it's the same thing, I guess, disable council provided services, just if that was clarified. Otherwise, it does seem a bit ominous. You're being disconnected from what and so on. If that was easy enough to do.
Yes. Thank you, through the chair. Yes, that clarification is fine. We'll make sure that it's included.
Just for clarity, as I understand it, in respect of the area of communications, council is not providing cell phones for any elected members, just laptops. That's correct. That's what I assumed. I'm just going to come to Councillor Rainey, then Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Mayor. Just some points of clarification that's to set my mind at ease a little bit. So this is all to do with a determination as set out by the Remuneration Authority, which it's not consistent with every single council having exactly the same determination, isn't it? Is it, I presume, because some councils may have a different policy on devices, for instance. Could you explain that?
Thank you. Good question. Through the chair. Yes, the Remuneration Authority sets the total remuneration for a mayor annually, and the total pool from which councillor honoraria is then set by a council. In terms of allowances, the Remuneration Authority sets each year the maximum allowable allowances. Councils can then decide, so they must have an internal policy, and they can decide whether that policy extends to the maximum allowable allowances. Bit of repetition there, sorry, that is set by the Remuneration Authority, or whether they wish to set certain limitations or caveats within that. For example, something that this council has previously adopted has been the Remuneration Authority sets the maximum mileage claimable amounts, and this council has specified that in order to be eligible for that, the travel would have needed to take place in a low or zero emission vehicle. So we can't go beyond the maximum set by the Remuneration Authority, but council can decide to operate within that.
Thank you. So just a subsequent question. So just on that point, first of all, the mileage is not part of a pool, is it? No, because it could go up or down.
Through the chair, that's correct. Mileage is an allowance which goes beyond the pool from which honoraria comes in.
So like, I just wanted to make a point by way of a question. We are determined as independent contractors for Nelson City Council. Is that correct?
For tax purposes.
Well, whether it's for tax purposes or whatever, we are independent contractors. That's what we are.
Not. Oh. I'm happy for
Well, I wouldn't mind getting clarification.
Through the chair, this has been canvassed previously, including taking external advice, and the term that the advice has used previously is that elected members hold a special relationship with the council. So that was helpful.
Very special.
For, as Mayor Nick has pointed out, for tax purposes, you are essentially self-employed and contractors to council, but the Remuneration Authority has a statutory responsibility to set honoraria levels and allowances, which they're required to do each year.
So, subsequent question, would it therefore be possible to negotiate KiwiSaver as part of a council's remuneration with council as a group?
The answer is, and we just need to be very mindful, if there's any issue of which every one of us around this table have a huge conflict of interest, it is over setting our own allowances and remuneration. And that is why there is a separate remuneration authority that sets those. The reason I balked a little bit, Councillor Rainey, at your independent contractor status indicates that we have a contract with the council. We don't. We're more like a members of parliament or a judge or a board member in our relationship with council. Council doesn't get to fire us. There is not a related contract, as much as Nigel's so disappointed.
But with all due respect, in relationship, in your example,
yeah,
you know, we're like a member of parliament or a judge. Boy, oh boy, we're not. When it comes to superannuation, and I'll save some of my thoughts to debate, but I just wanted to get clarification. I'm happy to hear what.
What I was going to say is that if there was to be any changes around issues like KiwiSaver or the like, my view is that we are completely conflicted as elected members, and that it would be wrong for us to make a decision that effectively impacts on our remuneration. It would break the very purpose of having a separate remuneration authority. If we wished, then the right way to do that would be to advocate to the remuneration authority for KiwiSaver or other things. But I certainly, as mayor, would be of a view that it is for such decisions to be made independently, that we can't make and should not make decisions that directly affect our own remuneration. That, in my view, would be to cross a line. Councillor Skinner?
Just going to add, actually, Pete Rainey makes a very good point, not wanting to debate it now, but regards to childcare, etc., that was something that was sort of advocated by the council, etc. And I think next term, what Pete Rainey's raised, I'd be very supportive of us looking into that. And with those examples you gave, actually reinforce that discussion very much so. So if I had any view that wasn't our business to be advocating that, I am, after your comments, I'm very strongly wishing it to be looked into next term.
Sure.
Thank you.
If there are, sorry, yes, Councillor Anderson.
A couple of questions. In regards to claiming mileage, so it just seems a little complicated, and quite often I'm shedding off to spaces, and it's not in my calendar, it's work, and there's quite often no council staff members available, and I don't have a low emission vehicle. I'm just wondering, does anyone actually claim mileage? I should ask the guys about.
Yes, I do as mayor.
Okay. The other question, so flights, so I got to do a trip around the North Island to check out some housing providers. And to me, it seemed, so I understand the policy about low emission and EVs, but there were lots of flights and lots of rental vehicles, and I kind of felt if I'd grabbed a vehicle from the pole and driven around, it would have been more efficient, cheaper, and not as emission heavy. I'm just wondering whether there is space for common sense to override what's written down in the policy. If I can do it cheaper with less of an impact as far as my emissions go.
My understanding is the intent, and I can't find the exact words, is that if an elected member is required on council business, they can apply to the pool of vehicles that is available in the same way as council staff. Do I understand that correctly, Deborah?
Thank you. Yes, that's correct. And coming back to Councillor's question as well, through the Mayor, there is a balancing act that is always struck. For example, so hybrid and or EV hired vehicles were booked as far as possible. The Remuneration Authority also requires that, for example, where a claim is to be made that is the most direct route that it is travelled, that it is the fastest form of journey that is taken. So there's a bit of balancing that takes place there as well.
And my last question, just around laptops. A couple of questions. Do we hold any risk? So I was a land administrator in the Navy, and I'm education and IT admin at Pacifica Trust. And I know that best practice, security-wise, is to organisations issue laptops, and I was very surprised that we didn't, and we get to make the decision, and there's no IT experts. I'm not an expert. I work in that space though. Do we hold any risk as far as?
Can I cut you off there? I don't want to get into debate about risk or so look, I've made a decision on the basis of feedback. I've taken advice from my team and I want to leave it at that. If you wish to discuss that further, we'll need to go into confidential. Sorry to be so vague, but we've got to be really careful here.
And I think you kind of understand where I'm coming from.
So can I just ask Councillor Anderson, do you want us to go on confidential business to dig further into the issues around the provision of laptops for elected members?
Yeah, I'd like to have that question answered.
Okay. So what I might do, and I'm just going to accept the indulgence and apologise to members of the public. I'm going to take 15 minutes of public business, of private business from 1 to 1:15 and just deal with all the confidential businesses once, including these questions over members' laptops and their security, just so that we're not going in and out of confidential business. So I'm going to move from the chair that we move into public business for the purposes of dealing with the items on the agenda and the questions about members' laptops so that they can be answered. Is Councillor Sanson happy to second that? All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. I apologise to members of the public and the media. My intention is to be reopened to public at 1:15.